And we will get back to you and get Mayor Pro Tem of Marquette. She helped organize 4 women's marches since Individual One came into office. She's got a great educational background in environmental engineering. I don't know if that's quite the right, maybe environmental planning is a better word. She's done a lot of different kinds of community services over the years. She's part of the Upper Peninsula Clean Energy Task Force, which is figuring out some alternatives for the UP as fossil fuels fade away. And she's been very, very involved as one of the chief Line 5 warriors. We know what Line 5 is all about. So Jen, please say hello to the group and let's hear what you got to say about life after Line 5. Thank you. Did we lose Jen?
Here I am. I'm sorry. I've stayed on mute, of course. I'm still unable to share my screen. So if somebody could make me a co-host, please.
There you go.
Ah, there we go. All right. Let's see. I
think go down to full screen. That'll do it.
There we go. Okay, so if somebody could watch the chat for me, because I can't see chat right now. I've got it on full screen. Thank you for that introduction, Jim. I am not an engineer. I don't know my right from my left. So you do not want me putting the solar panels up at your house. But what you do want me to do as a planner and a policy person is figuring out and making sure that it's legal and making sure that it works and is functional. That's my role in this part of our energy transition. I start with these images. Upper Peninsula Energy, on the left there are the round stones. This is from an Isle Royal excavation of the one of the pits where the indigenous people would harvest the copper. And so much of it starts with copper and the metal and the land here in the Upper Peninsula. Up on the upper right is the Quincy mine up in Hancock. The mine shaft building is still there. Those are the folks pulling the copper out of the earth that actually electrified our country. As folks might know, Calumet had electric streetcars before Lansing or Detroit.
Wow.
One of the earliest communities to electrify in the entire United States. And now in the Upper Peninsula, we pay some of the highest electric rates in the country. This is what really motivated me. I thought when I was moving up here, I was going to work on Great Lakes and water issues. And I ended up getting completely enmeshed into the energy issues up here. Basically, the Upper Peninsula was sort of first on electrification and how our country electrified, which means that we've already reached the end of the line. For reasons different than what's going on in Texas right now. I'm going to allude to that a couple times. But our system of energy is basically the one that was built in the early 1900s. And it's reached the end of its life, and we're ready to help lead the transition up here. And that final image is a dam in a community called Crystal Falls, Michigan, which is in the center, lower center UP. And that dam that you see in that picture is actually still operational and still generating power from 1931. So just a sense of how old our infrastructure is up here. So this is my furnace and my wood stove. When we bought the house 5 years ago, the furnace was 30 years old. It was a high efficiency furnace, innovative for its time, but you can see it had cracked and leaked and died. And we actually do build our energy systems to have redundancy in America and have done so for years and years and years. But that redundancy has come at a great cost. We have basically spent, and by intention, have about 15% excess capacity at all times on our grid. Except of course, if you live in Texas, where they didn't do that to save money and are now paying this extraordinary cost of that. And so I want to run the basic way this is going to go is I'm going to give you a couple overview ideas on our entire energy grid in the United States. And then I'm going to hone in on what's going on with Michigan and how we've come to understand deliverable fuels, propane, and what's going to happen next. So one of the this key idea that we build redundancy into the system is important. We need to, we rely on this. It is an essential utility, that utility term. And we have in Michigan, a 3-person commission, the Michigan Public Service Commission, led by Dan Scripps, as I mentioned, and a man named Tremaine Phyllis, and a woman whose nomination has been hung up by the Republicans in the legislature. And they have final say, and there's a lot of work that happens in that area. But if you have a co-op, such as the Cherryland Electric Co-op from the FDR rural electrification to Great Depression times, or you have a municipal utility, they are locally run. So just like we were talking about the need to get involved locally, if you have a co-op or a muni as your electric service provider or energy provider, everything is going to happen at the local level. And if you are serviced by DTE, consumers, one of the big investor-owned utilities that's been given them, they are regulated by the Michigan Public Service Commission. The next term there is intermittent. So that's a term, the official term for the idea that solar power, of course, works when it's sunny and doesn't work so well, or doesn't, is not designed to function in the dark, or wind only works when it's windy or cold, or windy or not windy. And somehow that idea that makes it less reliable. And that's just not true. What is true is that you build for the capacity of the energy source you are, okay, I just had is someone managing the waiting room? I just had it bing on me here as the, okay, thank you. Okay, sorry. So to go back to this really key concept of intermittent and the idea that, well, how could we possibly rely on sun and wind when it isn't always blowing all the time? And the key concept is that it may be intermittent, but we can plan for that capacity. So we can predict generally when it's going to be windy. We can predict generally when it's going to be sunny. And because we can make that prediction, we don't have to dig up the earth, transport coal, transport natural gas, transport oil to a given location. We can put up the power where we need it and then plan for its capacity. That's a really key, and it's one of those things where you just have to think about it completely differently. But when you start to do that, you actually can take advantage of the benefits of that way of operating, which is, of course, that the wind and the sun are free. So once we put the facility up and we plan around its capacities, we can have, in fact, a lower cost system. So because of the technology changes that have happened so fast, we can now say with absolute authority that even without subsidies, wind and solar are cheaper than coal and are at par or cheaper than natural gas. And then the last concepts down there, capacity storage. So then that also brings in the idea of storage and having batteries. I was on the call when you guys were talking about your electric cars. Basically all that technology and information that we've gotten to make sure that these darn things work all the time and that our cars have batteries that work all the time, that technology is being scaled up to actually serve entire communities. That storage, yes, it's still pretty expensive right now, but the costs are coming down. And then last idea is time of use is going to become more and more important. Basically, I also, to go back to the phone, remember when we used to make long distance phone calls with a credit card? Remember those days when you'd sit there and you had MCI, and I'm calling home and, you're dialing in 15 numbers in order to make a long distance phone call, but it was cheaper than Ma Bell because we had broken up Ma Bell. We're sort of moving. And then in the end, what's happened is now all phone calls are pretty darn cheap, right? We went through this technology transition, and that's what we're going through right now with our electric generation capacity and our heating capacity. I'm going to pause real quick. Any questions now that I might need to pick up, concerns? Okay. Thanks for listening to that. Let's move on here. So 2013, 2014, the polar vortex. You may have heard, I was up here in the UP at that time. I don't know how bad it was for you down there, but we had 79 days below 32 degrees. We had the ground freeze in the Upper Peninsula down to 7 and 8 feet, which is not what we had designed for. And so we had incredible price spikes. And it was basically due to 4 things going wrong at the same time, one of which was planned for. So again, our current system has to be maintained and serviced. And in fact, the place where they get propane, Rapid River, Michigan, outside of Escanaba, off of line 5, had a planned shutdown in that winter because they had to wait for the ground to freeze in order to do the heavy equipment work that needed to be done. Plus, these other things went wrong or were changing in the system, and it led to a great shortage of propane. And then in addition, in 2019, January 2019, it went down to 25 below in Lower Michigan, down by Detroit. It caused this fire, and much of the natural gas capacity for the 4 million people that live in Metro Detroit was shut down on the coldest day of the year. Now, and so we, an emergency alert went out. You can see it there in the middle of the page, asking people to drop their heat. But they were able to maintain one. There were 3 facilities here. One failed, one caught on fire, the other kept working. They shut down all of the auto manufacturing, and it meant that we were able to save our system. So we had a moment, kind of like what happened in Texas right now. It's going on in Texas right now, but we were able to get through it. We have a regulated system where government was able to step in, ask people to shut down, and take care of the system because it was ready for that. We had planned for problems. The out of this, they created what's called the Statewide Energy Assessment. And that report is what led to the idea that, hey, we need to do a better job in Michigan. Governor Whitmer had just been elected. Dan Scripps was on the Public Service Commission at that time. And so the group put together and said, hey, we need to plan better for the future because these disruptions from climate change are going to keep happening. This is the UP Energy Task Force. The upper picture, I think we look very Last Supper-ish, but we don't take it to that scale. But this is us meeting in Hancock. This is down here, us meeting way over in the Sioux. Back when we could travel, we were literally meeting in every corner of the Upper Peninsula so people could come and attend our meetings. And there's 17 of us, 12 of us are Yoopers, and we have been working through information presented to us from all of these different entities. Wow. And so it's been a very thorough, comprehensive, all of these presentations, are available online, all the slide decks. Wow. And in addition, you can actually watch them. They've all been recorded either on the Zoom or in person, and you can watch and learn and hear exactly what we learned. So what happened out of all that? Oh, so Jim actually asked me to talk a little bit about jobs and how this all works. So this, I guess, I don't know how many folks here are on propane. I'm going to have a slide in a minute that shows that there's actually many, many, many more propane users in the Lower Peninsula than the Upper Peninsula. But the way the system works is that it comes out of the ground, out of, but not, and propane can only come from being refined from something else. It doesn't come out of the ground. We have to basically cook it out of the oil that's in the ground. And then it gets moved to where it's needed. And that movement, truck, rail, pipeline, right here. We have salt caves in Lower Michigan where most of it, you can see 96% of it gets stored in these giant salt caves down underground between Detroit and Port Huron. And then it gets moved around. Then it gets put in a bullet at a retailer's, and then it gets taken to the final users. So we have 15 different propane dealers in the UP, and I'm sure there's 100 or more in Lower Peninsula. But the most important thing to know is that our system, with fracking, there is so much being developed, so much natural gas being pulled out of the ground, that we're at the point now where we have more than we need, and both Canada and the US are exporting it like mad to the rest of the world. So you can see here, there was almost no exports 10 years ago, 2011, till this date is till 2019, just shooting up. And then here's a fun fact. This PADD is the Petroleum Area District Distribution, is left over from the rationing of World War II. We are still managing our petroleum reserves, essentially using the framework from World War II. I think that's just to show you how some of this has been going on for a while. So production in the US has shot up, and production is aiming to get to the coast in order to be sent overseas. And then here's a map of the pipelines in particular, and also it shows you where these petroleum districts are. And here's line 5, this yellow line. There is the place in Rapid River, like I said, just outside Escanaba, where it's literally boiled off. And then Kalkaska has its own depropanizer, a place where it's boiled off from the natural gas that's mined or drilled for there. The Conway, Kansas is the epicenter for it, again, for sort of historical reasons. And then it's getting to Houston and getting on a boat, or getting to Chesapeake, out to the East Coast here to get to Europe. I'm seeing some, I can't see the chat, but it seems like the number's getting bigger. Is there anything I need to answer?
Jen, Mark is watching that, so he'll break in if he sees an urgent.
Okay, thank you. So many of you probably recognize this scene. Why do we care about what is happening to all this stuff that should be in the ground but is being sent out overseas? It's being turned into one thing and one thing only: plastics. That was true in 1969 when this was made, movie was made. It's true even more so now. The international demand for plastics is driving the much of the fracking at this point. They could suck up all of it. This is what we were told, sitting on the UP Energy Task Force, by the Canadian oil companies that are actually doing the drilling, and the wholesalers that are then moving it around. Over and over and over, we heard that again. The export market for plastics is driving what happens to natural gas in the United States and Canada.
Wow.
And as a result, the prices are starting to reflect that. And so I think I've made my point. I won't belabor it too much more. I'm going to now jump into what that means for us here. So as you can see now, is this Benzie County? Am I in the right spot? Are you here or here?
You got it. You got it. The blue one above that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So you're in a place where you have 25% of your residences are relying on propane. At least 25%. I'm up here in Marquette County. We do actually have natural gas here because of the mines. The iron mines brought it up here and paid for it to get up here. And I actually use that in my house now. But there are regions of the UP that are more reliant. But overall, primary heating source, according to the census, is 22,000 households in the UP and 300,000 households, primarily in the upper up north, in the Lower Peninsula.
Oh,
Here are all the locations that have been identified as propane terminals in adjacent or next adjacent states to Oklahoma as sources of propane. So when you hear the idea that the UP is going to freeze to death if line 5 shuts down, or even your region is going to freeze to death if line 5 shuts down, that's not the case. And I'm going to give you some more information about that. But we are in fact, because of fracking, awash in this stuff. And yes, they're trying to send it overseas. And yes, we're having a problem right now, obviously, with what's going on in Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, in this immediate. And in fact, I got a phone call literally at 9:30 this morning that Governor Whitmer is extending some propane truck delivery regulations so that people can travel further. There is a little bit of concern that we might need to access some of these further terminals that just came up literally in the last 24 hours. But we are overall awash in this stuff, as you know, because of fracking. And what happened in 2013-14 is we had this giant price spike. And you can see, of course, the price went up really fast, and it took a lot longer for that price to come back down. And in other words, we had some price gouging. And so as a result of this giant spike in 2013-14 with the polar vortex, what happened, and this is a slide, again, from the Canadian company that actually owns the material inside line 5. Enbridge just owns the pipe. The stuff inside the pipe is owned by a wholesale company called Plains Midstream Canada. And they told us that after 2013-14, they realized that they needed to have more storage to not get caught short. Therefore, the #1 recommendation that we made as a group in our April 2020 report is storage. The more that we can have it here to begin with when winter starts, the better off we're all going to be. And so, in fact, in our budget, that was just released by Governor Whitmer, there's matching funds for propane retailers to increase their storage capacity so that we don't have to worry that something bad will happen again like 2013-14. In addition, because propane is not regulated, they are now being required to report their prices more often to the Public Service Commission. The Attorney General's office is working on creating a law that actually prevents wholesale price gouging, because in fact, what happened in 2013-14 is that the wholesaler, the owner in the pipe, jacked their prices up, and then the retailers were forced to buy it from them and those other retailers around in other states. And we have evidence that that was the wholesalers were jacking the price up. And so we're working on changing that law. And then there's a long-term, decades-old process for people to get in to prevent heat shutoffs and weatherization through HUD and other agencies, social service agencies. And that program has some well understood problems about where certain money can only be spent on certain things. So even if you have another well-known problem, the money can't go there. And people are working hard to change those laws. And then another innovative idea is that maybe the state just buys it and holds on to it itself, and that's being investigated. We're looking at adding more rail back into the UP to allow for more transport, because when line 5 is shut down, we're not going to be able to get people off propane as quickly as we would like. We're going to need to keep moving it around for a while, and that would be done through rail. And then there's having the trucking available. So no one's saying that this is a final solution. This is how we would deal with a disruption on level with the polar vortex, climate change, and should line 5 shut down, there is in fact actions being taken to support folks being able to move from one energy source to another in a way that doesn't cause there to be enormous price spikes. And in particular, I want to highlight right now what the industry has done. I am not a propane retailer. As I said, I use natural gas at home, but we have heard over and over from the propane industry in Michigan that they are planning for changes to come. And this is, so every Wednesday from October to March, the National U.S. Energy Information Administration releases a propane report to help people understand what's going on. This is the one that was issued this Wednesday. So it's through February 12th. So this is just before the cataclysm in Texas. And you will see that Michigan, this is the rolling 5-year average, this gray here. This is last year, and this is this year. Michigan has been above average. Now we've had a pretty warm winter, but even beyond that, we are above, and folks are planning ahead for when we are going to potentially have a source shut down, i.e. Line 5 shut down, and that they would have more available. They have, and then other states, this is Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, they're more on average. Illinois, Indiana, Ohio are at average, and Kansas is below. Kansas has had the ice storm and is suffering pretty badly right now. This is to zoom in on Michigan. Just really want you to understand how much more is available right now in Michigan than there have been in previous years. And so this is the Derek Dowling, the executive director of the Michigan Propane Gas Association. We do not want to have a repeat of what happened during the polar vortex of 2013-14 winter. Since that time, we stress more than ever to our members about keeping adequate supply and making sure they stress to our customers about ordering in advance. Pre-buying and pre-planning is absolutely a necessity and is something the industry has stressed. The Michigan industry is very proud of the fact that we learned our lesson from that vortex and have not had a repeat, not even close. It is very much in our minds that we don't have that happen again. I'm repeating what the industry is telling us about how things are going with propane. So I'm actually gonna, so on that question of what happens when line 5 shuts down, the risk of line 5, of course, is immediate. The break and having that oil and spill out is an immediate thing. Changing technology is going to take a little more time. So let's bring it here, have it here as we work through how we're going to transition what our energy system is going to be. And then that's like the thing that I hope you come away from this. And then what's coming next is this. So we're part of the Mid-Continent Independent Service Operator. So the ERCOT that we're hearing so much about with Texas, where they have one system for just the state of Texas. We are part of something that goes from Alberta to Louisiana. And all these dots are proposed power projects in our region that would support our energy use. And as you can see, the vast majority of them are solar. Next is wind, next is battery storage. Hybrid is when industrial facilities that are generating a lot of heat because of what they do are capturing that heat and bringing it back into their plant as an electricity source. And of all these states and all these places, there are only 15 natural gas plants being proposed going forward for the future. So the renewable energy system is here. And we're just about to advance out of that, having to make a phone call with 15 digits to something more like this with time of use and being able to manage our electric system in a much more fine-grained way than just turning on coal and letting it run. And I'll just stop there. And that was a lot of information, and I really welcome your questions.
Jen, this is Kathy Williams. I live in Manistee County, and I'm just wondering, with all this information, we had our state senator, Kurt Vanderwall, just this week had a pro Line 5 tunnel editorial in our Traverse City paper talking about, you know, jobs and, you know, all the normal garbage they talk about and why we can't lose Line 5. How do we get them to pay attention to this?
We have to elect different legislators. The lines are drawn.
Sure.
And the courts, there's stuff going through the courts right now. And we did, so we elected Biden. Pete Buttigieg is the head of Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation has final say over pipelines. Pete Buttigieg came out against Line 5 in his campaign.
Okay, good. You're saying they won't listen. It doesn't matter how much we know and how right we are. They're not going to listen, is what you're saying.
That has certainly been my experience.
Okay. And I have another question.
Sure.
I'm sorry, everyone. This is a personal question. I just bought a cabin in Wetmore. And I'm seeing all those yellow dots right there. What are those projects? Are those co-op?
Solar.
Or, right. No, I know they're solar, but what kind of projects? Are they industrial or the co-op? Who's building
These are
them?
bigger projects. None of them are in Wetmore. You can go on this map. I'm going to send you guys a list of, I'm sorry I didn't have time to put this together beforehand. I'm going to send you a list of links when I'm done, so that you can have this. You can actually zoom in onto this map to the county level.
Okay.
It's really
I'm in the Alger Rural Co-op.
Right.
Okay. All right.
You're going to pay at really high electric rates. You want to go get energy efficiency right away.
Yeah, I'm thinking about putting, I have panels here. I have a ground unit here, and I'm thinking it's a real small cabin. I could probably, a few panels would probably do me really well up there. So thank you.
Hey, Jen, this is Jim. Can you talk a little bit more about what the propane companies in the UP would do if Line 5 stopped operating? What are they? Do they have the storage built, or are they planning the storage now that a chain of propane trucks, the great big ones, and perhaps some rail service can keep the UP going? The people that need it, is that something you're confident about?
Yes. So you're going to hear about the need for hundreds of trucks to replace Line 5. And that's only true if you take into account what ends up in Sarnia, right at the end of the line. As I showed, we only have 18,000 homes in the UP that rely on it primary, and then there's another set of 10,000 roughly that are part-timers that use it seasonal. So, and oh, here's another really important thing. The depropanizer in Rapid River is only 25 years old. It wasn't there before 1996. People weren't freezing to death. Costs were not outrageous before we had that facility. You go to Wisconsin, you go up here to, this is stuff coming in actually from Ontario over to Eastern UP. The Kalkaska facility, until we stop fracking, is going to keep generating an enormous amount of material. There's a bunch of stuff that actually ends up in Chicago that for us is not a big deal to go get. So, and we have documented evidence of propane retailers up here actually buying rail lines on their own dime, not even waiting for the state subsidy, just to get their facilities up and running and ready to go. We also have a letter from Feral Gas, which is a national propane dealer, that to every one of their customers in the UP that said, don't worry, well, Whitmer shouldn't shut down line 5. We have enough and you don't want to leave us.
Wow. So what you're saying is that Enbridge is the one that's worried about closing down the pipeline, not the propane companies.
Right. And the oil company that owns the product. And Canada is starting to figure out that, oh, wait, we're really dependent on this. Because again, you know, it's a Canadian company sending Canadian product to a Canadian destination through Michigan.
Right.
Jen, this is Stephen Thompson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. When the flow is shut down in this pipe and it's finally removed from our water, do we still have is the tunnel a separate issue that we will still have to fight to keep from happening?
Yes. Short answer is yes. And that's where President Biden, Buttigieg, PIMSA, the pipeline, the Federal Pipeline Authority, is going to be critical in those questions.
So then we should put our opposition to the tunnel. We should zone in on federal authorities to keep that from happening.
The way that, so yeah, good question. And let me clarify. So you probably know that the state Eagle did permit the building of the tunnel.
Yes,
That's
that.
Because the laws are written in a way, and of course, Enbridge, followed the law, that they had no legal recourse. The way that it was written, it had to be permitted. Now, there are other questions around that are going to go in front of the U.S. Army Corps to do a full environmental impact statement. That's really important. And there is in front of the Michigan Public Service Commission, Dan Scripps, that they are going to have authority over whether that tunnel is serving our energy needs. So it's layered, and I'm sorry, it's complicated. I'm sorry, there's not a soundbite. Follow Oil and Water Don't Mix. Follow FLOW, Friends. I'm forgetting what FLOW stands for, of course, in this.
For love of water.
FLOW. Oil and Water Don't Mix. And there is a petition to Biden to ask him to shut down line 5 like he shut down the other pipelines.
And that would, if he did that, then that would effectively keep the tunnel from happening also.
Honestly, I don't have that at my, there's a big question about whether feds or state is going to have ultimate jurisdiction, and that is not yet decided.
All right, thank you.
I'd like to say that Pete Buttigieg is very connected to Michigan. His wife is a Traverse City native.
Right.
And I believe they have a home there.
That's correct.
Great. We got any other questions for Jenn?
Maybe we should be doing a letter writing campaign to Pete.
Well, and first, make sure you sign on to that petition. They've got 5,000 names, I think, at this point, but they really would like more.
Where do we go to find that?
It's oil and water don't mix. Again, actually, maybe I'll stop sharing my screen.
Oh, it's on Flows. Okay, I may have already signed it then.
Okay.
I am connected to Flow.
Do we have any other questions for Jenn?
This is Lisa. Really briefly, I put a copy of the petition in the chat from the Oil and Water Don't Mix website.
Great, thanks.
This is Greta Bolger. I just wonder if there is a, I don't know, key messages or bullet points or a link that that Jenn can provide that will allow me to put something up on our Benzie Democrats Facebook page regarding this issue.
There's an op-ed that was written that include partially by Barbara Stammers's sister and some other good folks up here. They call themselves the UP Propane Research Team. I'll send that along. And like I said, I'm sorry I didn't have time to get this to you beforehand, but I will have something to you after this.
And who will you send that to?
Whoever you want me to.
You can send it to me and I'll pass it along, Jenn. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think
I have one question, Jim, if I could. When we were talking about all the varying energy sources, I'm not very knowledgeable. What about the thermal from underneath us? There was no discussion about that. Is that taken into consideration ever? And Crystal Mountain is using that as an energy source.
Yeah, there's real quick, the new movement is towards decarbonization and electrification so that we can put clean energy on a clean wire. You can't put dirty energy on a wire. You can only put clean energy on a wire. And heat pumps, air source heat pumps work in our colder climates. There's also geothermal. We're looking at up here in the old, particularly in the old copper mining country, there's a lot of water in those old mine shafts that could be used as geothermal. There's Michigan Tech folks working on that right now in the city of Negaunee. So that's all coming. And again, we're moving into a system where the energy source is not going to be some giant coal plant or nuclear. Now, nuclear is another question, but there's one big source of energy that you then got to move on around. We're going to have energy and distributed in this place, this kind of energy makes sense, and in this place, this kind of energy makes sense. We back it up with a battery, and we have what we need. And we also want to be as efficient as we can with our appliances, with our vehicles, with our homes and buildings.
Okay, one more question. We should go.
Is that me, Barb Stamaris?
Yes, okay.
Jenn,
Hi.
two things. I did have an op-ed rebuttal to Representative Vanderwall, and it was the day after his, so it was in yesterday's Record Eagle. But the question or the request I have for you is, would you talk about the energy grid, where we are now, and what is your hope, let's say 10 years out, with renewables and what you're talking about?
Well, I was absolutely amazed that last month, the iron mine company, the last remaining iron mine in Marquette County, announced that it's going to reduce its carbon footprint by 25% by 2035. Who would have thought that the iron mine company would be making this announcement? And that's because of the Paris Climate Agreement. It's because of Joe Biden. It's because of the international community coming together saying that decarbonization is where we need to go. Governor Whitmer has made the pledge. Many cities and states have made the pledge. And so we are moving in this direction. And folks will say not fast enough, and the utility industry will go, oh my God, stop pushing us so hard, but we are moving in that direction. We're going to have community solar. We're going to have wind projects. One wind turbine can now produce enough power all by itself for 10,000 homes. Now, and so in the right place, where people want them, DTE is actually purchasing a couple of these and putting them down in the thumb on the farmland. So the farmer will farm around it. But in wind farms, and then we get into the question of moving it around. So it's going to be this mix. It's going to be some big sources to help move, to grab energy where it's really plentiful, and then smaller projects all around to help support different locations all around the state.
Could you answer this?
Sure.
What needs to happen next in terms of improving our national energy grid?
So there's a guy named David, I just blanked on his name, at vox.com, David Roberts at vox.com has written some great stuff on transmission. We have prevented back, anyway, there's stories and books. Leah Stokes is this woman who's written an incredible book, Leahstokes, really prominent thinker on this. Right now in our nation, we give each state a lot of latitude on what happens. So obviously, Texas happens, but in Michigan, we have a really serious crisis that we weathered by managing and planning. It's really done at the state level. And then the federal stuff is going to be moving it around from state to state and keeping it connected. And then at the local level, are there brownfields where your community could put up solar panels? Are there, maybe you're in a wind corridor, maybe you're not. Wind is more controversial, but putting solar on landfill properties and brownfield properties, generally there's already infrastructure there. Just build on it. It's sitting there vacant. You can turn it into a taxable property.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Great, thanks, Barb. And Jen, I think we'll wrap it right here.
Sure.
Thank you so much. I know your contact information is in the chat. People want to
Terrific.
more
Terrific presentation.
but really, thank you very much. Let's give Jen a hand.
Thank you, Jen, for your commitment.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Well, thank you. This is really inspiring. I hope we can get 80 people at our next Marquette County Democratic meeting. Well done, folks. Thank you.
Thanks for being such a star attraction.